Hello, everyone, and welcome to the WREVA Electrifying News January 2025 segment. With me, as always, I've got my good friends Eric Stephen joining us from the Listowel area. How are you doing, Eric?
I'm doing great, Mark.
Excellent, excellent. And we have our roving reporter, Mr. Ian Graham, joining us from sunny parts of Mexico. How are you today, sir?
I'm just going to give us all tacos. Tacos.
I think you need a bit of snow there, Ian. I think you need a bit of snow. I've got lots to donate to you right now. So.
Well, my ice machine is working very well.
Now, I do have to apologize with Ian. We do have some microphone issues. It's still workable, but the audio is not going to be as great as if he was sitting in the studio. But you get to look at the view behind him, so don't worry too much about that audio. The view looks spectacular.
There, if you look closely, you'll see whales.
Oh, man. Fantastic. Fantastic. And so, Ian, go ahead and let's bring up the deck for January.
All right. I'm doing a romantic thing right now here with the sunset, so it's good.
we might lose the light. Ian may have to adjust. We'll see.
Yes. All right. So I guess the first thing to talk about and discuss is driving to Mexico. And it was from Kitchener, Ontario to, I'm just north of Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, and roughly 4,400 kilometers. Charging costs were around $420, $30 Canadian. Mexico has awesome toll roads. Those cost me a little over $200. And definitely anyone who decides to want to drive in Mexico, the toll roads are so worth it. They're well maintained. They have what they call the Green Angels. They have the National Guard, etc. So it feels safe when you do this. And now, mind you, some of the Mexican drivers will warn you that it's 110 kilometers is the limit. It's nothing to have people going by you like 140 plus kilometers on these. But you know what? Stay to the right side of the road and it's okay. You can see some of the pictures here. The two Mexico signs was at Laredo, Texas when I crossed the border. And from there went to Monterrey. Metawala, I think is how you say it. San Luis Potosi, Guadalajara. I passed by Tequila. And that was an amazing, the scenery is incredible. And so while I'm charging here, it was all Tesla chargers. There was one company called Evergo that I used on the way to Guadalajara, just as a little bit of a top up. And you can see, Red Bar Tesla here in my driveway, and I'm just charging right now at 110. I did bring a Tesla charger down, and I've got the breaker and everything else to get it going, actually, and then I'll have a level 2 charger here. But to be honest, 110 works great. You got good weather here, and you're also putting another 100 plus kilometers. And even better is if I kind of go like this, you can see the solar panels. I have no electric bill here whatsoever. In fact, this past year I produced over 7,000 kilowatt hours of excess electricity. So to charge the car is not a big deal on that part of it. So I probably could charge a few cars if need be.
You've got to set up your own charging network in your neighborhood.
Yeah, pretty much. And my neighbors, a lot of them are on Facebook and Instagram and were following me down, and they all got a kick out of it. They thought it was great. And I'm not the first person to do this. I've got a couple of friends from Quebec City, one who drives a Model Y and one who drives an Ioniq 5. And they did the trip and they love it. And it's like the third season for my friend with the Model Y. It's just a thing now. And, in terms of compared to a gas car, like cost-wise, it's cheaper. Did I have extra time put on? Maybe a little bit, but you know what? It's relaxing. I would say I charged about every 2 to 3.5 hours. And then the car did amazing with showing me where to charge. And you know, on average, I sat for 15, 20 minutes to charge. But there were some times where I was in an area and I just looked around and I let the car charge up way past what I needed for the next stop. So it was a nice little trip. Let's put it that way. It worked out really well.
Now, Ian, you drove during just the days, basically, right? Like how many days did it take you to get there, and you were spending the nights in certain places?
Yeah. So basically, it was like 5 days, or you could say almost 4.5 days if you wanted to really be picky. If I pushed it, I probably could have done it in 4 days. But it was 5 days. And every night when it came to around 6 o'clock, or when I started seeing if it was getting dark, I just went on to booking.com and I just looked for, you know, somewhere cheap. I'm not going to be, you know, fancy or anything for I just need a bed and a shower. And on average, like Mexico, on average, it cost me $50 a night, maybe 60. The States was a bit more, around $70, $80, but some of them included free breakfast. The breakfast in San Luis Potosi, oh my God, it was incredible. Like, it was a breakfast buffet. That wasn't included in the price, but dang, it was something else. And yeah, so and you know, the really cool thing was in Mexico especially, I had a couple times where when I stopped at the Tesla chargers, it was around like a trucking center, and there was like multiple stores around there. There was restaurants. And I would get sometimes some people would come over and talk to me, you know, about the trip. And I met a gentleman in Monterey who had the same car as myself, except the performance version, and he was Mexican. And it was great to get a perspective on all this. That's for sure. So, and down in our podcast, I've got a little talk. You know, Mexico's expanding with the whole electric vehicle aspect of things. So it's definitely can be done.
Yeah. Last time I was in Monterey, I saw quite a few electric vehicles on the road. So, and even at the hotel next to me, they had a number of Tesla destination chargers. So, quite a few Teslas charging. So it was good to see.
Absolutely.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, it's the variety of electric vehicles that we're going to find out. You're going to see, like, they're just expanding. It's great that way. Yeah. And price wise too, very good. So, all right, from sunny warm to cold.
Oh yeah, right up to Saskatchewan. Yeah, so CBC did an article here, and I think this is something that we all kind of know already as EV owners, but I thought it was a reasonably well done interview with there in Saskatchewan, talking about, you know, how owners handle, you know, the deep coldness. You know, sometimes we think we're cold, but Saskatchewan obviously experiences much more than we do by a substantial margin. So, and they were talking about obviously the benefits that we know about, that, you know, you don't have to worry about a car not starting in the winter, basically, and you can remote start the car in your garage, basically, and preheat it before you get going. And you know, EVs run and work extremely well in the cold. Yes, you do lose some range. You do have to anticipate that. But outside of that, they're fantastic vehicles, and they operate very well in these types of conditions, including traction control and ability to drive in winter weather. So I thought it was a well done article done by the CBC interview there.
Yeah, it was well done because it was even handed. We've seen some of these articles where they had a slant to the article, and that was not here in this particular article from Saskatchewan, which was great to see. Hopefully, more of this type of reporting will continue, where they're not slanting it one direction for their own narrative. It was good to see that the points were valid.
Yeah, I like the fact that they interviewed some. You know, the gentleman with the Model 3, and he was very upfront about the cost savings and explaining how well it actually does work. The big, the average of being 20% loss does seem right, because when I've gone north in January to like Huntsville and area, that always seemed to be roughly what I felt I lost, was around 20% range. And when you compare that to a gas car, it's actually very similar. I mean, of course, the one thing with the gas car is that the engine is generating heat, which they use for the cabin. So it's got that one advantage. But I always sort of say, like, yeah, but in July, why do you still have that heat on that? So,
Yeah.
but I had to put in the FUD picture as well. Just, it's stuff like this, saying, oh, because of a defroster, give me a break. It's there's just too many people now with electric vehicles are going to look at that and go, yeah, that's not even close to being reality. So, all right. So from the cold to an interesting aspect, which is brought up in here about longer journeys in cold weather. But this is a CAA survey, and I would say that a lot of it, I agree with a good vast majority of this. And from some other podcasts that we've done, there's some stats here that we have talked about in the past too.
Exactly. What was great to see about this particular CAA article was they interviewed a lot of drivers. We were in the tens of thousands, 16,000, I think was the number that they interviewed, and talked about what they felt about these EV drivers, what they felt about their current ride, what they felt, any pitfalls they saw, any problems, if they would be continuing with an EV. It was a good survey where they talked to these people. And unlike some other surveys, again, that we've seen from the FUD side of things, the vast majority of people said, this is spectacular vehicle. I have no issue driving electric, doing my daily tasks, doing my regular stuff, and going on vacation once or twice or three times a year. I have no issues. 87% said they plan on buying another EV in the future. They even 7 out of 10, 70%, did say that they have an issue with some fast chargers in the areas that they run in. So there is this issue still with some cars that they have unreliable charging in some of the areas where they're traveling to. So that's something that we knew was an issue. We saw this last year when there was an issue, for example, in northern Ontario, where people were traveling up beyond Sudbury, and there was only one line of chargers, and they went down, and they had some issues in getting them back up. Now, that has since been resolved, but the redundancy was not there for that particular season. Hopefully, as the infrastructure of chargers builds up in these far-off areas, this survey information will change. But I know where we are, southern Ontario, between Windsor and all the way up the 401 corridor, this has greatly been reduced to no problem because there's so many different people, so many different companies that have set up chargers in that area. Now, granted, you go outside of the 401 corridor, you go far north, there are some issues, and there will continue to be some issues. But you also have to look at, if you're a new EV prospective buyer, where do you drive? How often do you drive to these far off areas? Or are you basically in the 401 corridor and drive between the cities that the corridor connects? That's something that you need to think about if you're going to get an EV. PlugShare can be a great app for you to take a look at what's around in the areas that you travel. But this of course, is something that you need to do a little bit of homework, and it's something that you should do before you buy an EV. But overall, I think the survey bodes very well for the EV movement.
Yeah, I fully agree, Mark. It's a good survey, and I agree with your points. To add, when we've talked about this many times on these shows too, is the infrastructure and the maintenance of the items as well too. We're at the point now where a lot of DC fast chargers were installed using incentives, and then there isn't always that incentive to maintain the infrastructure that's out there as well too. But at the same time, there's also been a lot of learning that has happened over the last several years too. So a lot of the infrastructure that's going in today is a big improvement from what it was before. So the new charging stations are becoming more reliable. They're installing multiple units per site now in many of these places, and they're starting to place them in better locations as well too than they did before. So while there has been some negatives, there's also there's still a huge amount of infrastructure that's going in today, and a lot of that infrastructure comes from the learnings from that as well too. Even the DC fast chargers, there's a lot of learning that has happened there, where the first DC fast chargers came in were somewhat unreliable, but the units that are now coming out now are much more reliable and much better than they used to be as well. So,
Agreed.
Yeah, everything that's been a learn on this, and I think it's great with the feedback from the public about they're not satisfied with the number of fast chargers available, and I do agree with them on that. Level 2 can only go so far. It works maybe well for local, but for anyone out of town, you want that level 3 charging. And of course, especially with the colder weather, as we just brought up as well, it's going to give a little more confidence on all this. I also found, interesting response report that most of travel is within 100 kilometers of the home. I like to know what percentage that is, because the stat I always hear is 95% of us drive less than 50 kilometers a day. So. Yeah. With an electric vehicle with 500 kilometers, it's like, well, I don't think we have too much to worry about, even at 100 kilometers at this point. Yeah. One thing I bring up to everyone, even with this trip to Mexico, but when I go north, it's a 6-hour drive. I stop once for 20 minutes. And if you think about 6 hours in a day, for a lot of people, that's a lot of driving. And if you had to stop once, oh, come on. You're going to do that anyways. And quite honestly, it's healthy for you to consider doing that every 2-3 hours to get out of the car, stretch, and everything else. So, yep. But I think I like the fact that CA survey was done. I like the fact that they are being very honest with what people are stating, and I don't think it's a big issue to solve, to be honest, because the way things are going, it's going to be solved very easily. So it's great.
Yeah, and even on your point there, Ian, actually about the range, today, like my round trip commute a day is 80 kilometers going to and from work. Mm-hmm. And now I've got an EV that's got almost 500 kilometers of range. And today before I left work, I remote started the car, and then all of a sudden a whole bunch of things came up at work, and I completely forgot about it. My car was actually remote started and running for 40 minutes, but I didn't care. I got lots of range, and it was fine. Just my windows were nicely well melted. My car was nicely warmed up before I went home from work. So
the only preconditioning I need to do here is to take the bird junk off my windows. Yes. All right. So I just realized I didn't put in the proper numbers here, and it'll take me all of 2 seconds. I was getting this together and I got distracted, and anyways, we'll figure this out very quickly here. The Sea Lion, actually, I'm not going to say there's anything because it's not released yet. It actually, next week, BYD is going to release this next week, and I've been invited. I'm not sure what day it is. I was supposed to get a message about this, but anyways, the big thing about BYD, of course, is a Chinese company, but they are here in Mexico, in Puerto Vallarta. I went to the dealership about a week ago with one of my neighbors who's from Montreal, and he has a car here. It's a smaller car. It's very similar to the Dolphin Mini EV or the Dolphin EV, and he was really impressed with the prices of everything here, and with the cars themselves. Overall, he thought were really cool. And you can see, the range here: 380 kilometers, 405 kilometers for the regular Dolphin. But then you get into the 520 with the Seal. The Sea Line's 456. And then, not normally that I want to bring up a hybrid, because I'm always a little indifferent on hybrid, but I think for a truck, this is a half decent price for a truck, and it's 840 kilometers combined with a 100-kilometer EV range, which, if you know the Chevy Volt, on average, that's kind of, we're getting about 90 to 100 kilometers with the new EV, the new Chevy Volt. And for a truck, there's that 100-kilometer range that we just talked about with the other people. Yeah. So it's, anyways, I asked, how are people feeling about this? And, he says they're getting lots of inquiries, and I think they think people are starting to really get it. The other quick thing, too, is just like Tesla, with expanding the network and everything, BYD is doing the same thing. The only thing I haven't quite figured out with BYD is I think they kind of have their own charger as well, which you would need an adapter for. It's not really, I'm not saying there's no CCS, but it was a little odd when I looked at the seal. It didn't look like a CCS on that part of it. So I'd have to research that part a little bit more. Anyways, Mexico is moving forward with this, and there are, of course, BYD in Guadalajara, Mexico City, and other locations. I'm pretty sure that you would see it in Monterrey as well, being it's a major city center.
Yeah. The first time I saw a BYD Dolphin was in Monterrey, actually. I saw one. And I mentioned on a previous show that one of my colleagues in the Philippines actually owns a BYD Dolphin as well, too. And it does have a CCS port, by the way, that car. So,
yeah.
And I was running the conversions on these too. So the BYD Dolphin, 358,000 pesos is about $25,000 Canadian, which is, that would be a pretty nice price tag for a car like that, I think, here. And the BYD Seal at 888,000 pesos, that's roughly 60,000 Canadian, which I think is pretty comparable to many of the other EVs in the market for that type of thing. So.
It does seem that the Dolphin is it's obviously the entry price for a vehicle, but man, it would be nice to get some of the EV, a couple of models in Canada down lower. Certainly, you would push adoption, and having that ability is something that the Canadian market definitely needs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even the truck. I mean, that's not a bad price for a truck.
Yeah, that's
as well.
60,000. Yeah, Canadian.
Yeah, and I've seen that truck down here a few different times, and it's a cool truck. I actually dig it. It's pretty cool. All right. It was just a diamond mine, but something has been found, and I was waiting for the rest of the story to be going on about glowing green and little gleamy eyes, aliens, and everything that way.
Yeah, so this is the diamond mines up north in the Northwest Territories, and basically, what they're doing now is they're installing solar panels way up in the far north. Because one of the big challenges they have up there is how do you power these facilities and stuff like that, and the traditional way to do that is to haul diesel fuel up there and run diesel generators to power these facilities. And that's actually a very expensive proposition to do on a regular basis. Now, obviously, in the wintertime, this time of year, they're in 24 hours of darkness, and solar panels are not extremely effective. But in the summertime, they're almost in 24 hours of daylight. And off the snow, they're actually installing bifacial solar panels, and they're getting reflection of the snow, sun off the snow as well too. They generate extra power. So they found that this has been a very effective way to reduce their footprint for a significant portion of the year, and will significantly help their operations there and reduce costs.
It's great to see that these again, the renewables are showing their strength, that as Eric has said, they've got different run times based on the time of the year. But again, it's absolutely free to collect it. It's not like you're burning diesel constantly to fuel the sun. You're just collecting what's hitting the ground. Why not set it up with solar panels? And they come with huge warranties, 20, 21, 22 years that they will remain effective. Plus, why not set it up over the long term if the facility is going to be there long term as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you know, to your point, that's one of the arguments I've always had with people, like when they say, oh, when the sun doesn't shine. Well, you can apply that exact same argument when your fuel completely runs out and you got to fill it up again, and you had to, you know, what was the process to get that fuel? It's huge to get that. Whereas with a solar panel, you produce it once and you're talking, you know, they're actually 25, 30-year warranties in a lot of the panels now. And the cost of them and the power of them has, you know, the cost has come down more than double, and the power of them has more than doubled, if not tripled in most cases. The panels above me are 530 watt bifacial. And the panels back home in Kitchener I got are 210 watts. Those were $900. These were $400. And of course, you know, the big thing with all of this is you couple it with the new battery technology that comes out to store this to help offset for your nighttime costs. You know, it's just it's a great positive loop, and you're not having to do really much of anything to keep it going. You know, if you plant a seed and you grow the vegetables and you use those seeds from those vegetables and you keep going, that's great. But if you have to kind of always go out and forage, that's a lot of work to do that stuff. It's really, you know, the same thing. So, yeah, it was great to see this article, and you know, it just shows how much potential that we actually have with renewables.
Yeah, and just to emphasize too, just getting diesel to this place is a logistical challenge in itself, and a possible ecological issue too, because if you know you're sending either ships or diesel trucks in these areas, often on ice roads or other stuff like that. You know, one of these trucks crashes and has a leak up in the tundra. You know, that's an ecological nightmare. So, yeah,
falling through the ice, not good, and it could happen. Those ice roads, I think, could become less and less as time goes on with what we're seeing.
Yeah,
so,
very true.
Yeah. All right. This is I found this to be an interesting article. I'll let you guys discuss this first, but there's an aspect about this with the automakers that does kind of bug me a little bit, if you want to say, in comparison to,
Yeah, well, what we've got here is, of course, we've heard that the Isev program was put on pause and then promptly a day later ran out of funds completely. Because, of course, there was a rush for people trying to get the EV. Now that they knew that the program was disappearing shortly, that put a rush on purchases, and boom, they were out of money. So promptly after it was announced that the program was on pause and then out of money, the Automakers, consortium got together and decided to pen a letter to Ottawa and ask that the federal EV mandates, which have been in place for many years, for them to be cut as well, because they said the Isev program is gone. There's no rebate for Canadians buying EVs. Then we want out of the requirement to sell so many EVs. And of course, that's really not what we're after here. This is, we're trying to incentivize Canadians to purchase EVs, and we're doing it on two fronts, or we were doing it on two fronts until recently. We were offering a carrot to the consumer to say, get a federal credit of $5,000 when buying an EV that qualifies. And then on the other side, we were saying to the automobile manufacturers, listen, we want you to start moving production to EVs. So we want to start putting a mandate in place that you need to sell X amount. And if you don't sell X amount, there's going to be a fine, or you can buy credits to mitigate that fine. So that's what has been going on now for a little while. We have put over 700,000 EVs on Canadian roads with the iZev program to date. So it has been successful. And I would say that, you know, with Canada reaching in the area of somewhere between 15 and 20% of EV sales across the board, it has been successful. But I think that the automobile manufacturers are short-sighted in that they're hoping this will go back to just a gas economy. And now that we're sitting at 15 to 20%, I don't think we're going back. You know, yes, there may be a stall that the iZev has happened. We saw that stall happen when Ontario pulled its rebate away, but EV sales continued and progressed, and over the years they've increased. So I'm thinking that the automakers are kind of short-sighted here. I realize that they're doing this because it's in their best interest, they believe. But for all of us as a whole, I think that would definitely be a step backwards that we cannot afford to take.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, Mark. I think there's quite a few things at play here. Just speaking of the mandate, obviously these rebates can't last forever. At some point, vehicles need to be able to sell for the things, and manufacturers need to be able to sell vehicles for the price point that consumers are willing to take them up on that. So manufacturers definitely have to start pushing, not just from a consumer standpoint, but just because even some other competitors like the Asian manufacturers like BYD we just talked about are have more affordable options. Basically, other manufacturers need to start looking at bringing those options to Canada as well too. Those types of products and those types of things. We can't all be going out and buying Lucid Airs. We need to, we had to get more affordable options in the market and get them there. And they're coming. They're getting there. That's where my next point is one of the things that concerns me is the suddenness of how this program sort of came to an end, or in that the funds just suddenly ran out of money. I was looking at stories of people on some of the forums where they went to a dealership, and the dealership said, "Oh, wait a minute, I can't submit the rebate anymore." It was just kind of out of the blue, and that's unfortunate. To me, there needed to be a good lead time and a good warning to say, hey, this is when the program is going to end, and make that clear to people as well too. I don't think that was very clear to a lot of people for this. And we talk about a rush at the end too. I think Quebec just ended or is phasing out its rebate program, so there was a big rush at the end of the year in Quebec for a lot of EVs as well that got there. But
at least that one was planned. Like the public knew it was being phased out, so
Correct.
they were able to get their ducks in a row and decide whether they were buying or waiting or what they were doing. But at least they had the time to do it.
Yeah, but I think one of the things that scares some of the manufacturers as well too is in order to bring the prices down of EVs, you need volume, and I think they're a little concerned with the change of administration in the south. South of the border, we have a different tune being talked down there, and so there's some concerns in how that's going to affect EV sales in the near future. EVs are the future. We all know that, but is this going to be a speed bump in the road, or is this going to be or is it going to be nothing at all? So that's a big question mark for a lot of people, and I think there's a lot of people running around scared with the uncertainty that's happening. So. In my opinion, the ZEV program needs to stay. We need to be encouraging automakers to come out with more affordable options for EVs and get them on the market. So, because it can be done, we've seen it be done. So.
Yeah, I think that last point, Eric, is kind of leads into a little bit of how I feel with these manufacturers. Is they need to figure this out. Some of these guys have been around for a long time, and other companies are kind of showing the way that they can make this more affordable. The point that I didn't like about this was we voiced concerns over insufficient charging infrastructure. Well, I'm sorry. I look at a company like Tesla, and that charging infrastructure is only growing, and they know it contributes to people buying their vehicles. And the fact that they're opening up their charging infrastructure to the major auto manufacturers, and today I just heard like Hyundai should be soon as well. So I'm kind of like, you guys, you can't bellyache about insufficient charging what have you done yourselves for some of this stuff? I'm not saying that some of them haven't, but I don't see the same sort of efforts being put in. And you know what? You can only, I think, rely so much on third-party charging solutions and government, because when it comes down to it, you know, some of those roadblocks, and a perfect example, like I mentioned about Manitoulin Island, that is a major tourist spot. Why is it so? There's not one level 3 charger on that island anywhere. It's like a couple of level 2s, and that's again where I look at, you know, if you guys want this to work, you kind of have to, I think, pony up to some of this as well, and not just a manufacturer. I think this is where I look at all the auto manufacturers get together, you know, get this common plug, and work together on all this, because I think everyone's going to benefit on all this stuff as well. Just quickly too, to Mark's point about how the phase out didn't really happen, but in Quebec it was kind of known that that was happening. I totally agree with that. Like that was a, whoa. We, you know, and Eric, like you mentioned, you've seen a couple articles, I have as well, where people went in to pay for this vehicle, and like that's not going through, and you know, there's no real heads up for the consumer, let alone the seller, and I don't think that's that should have been a date that said, like, hey, this is the date we're phasing this out.
Or if it wasn't a date, at least they could have said, we've used half the funds that were allotted. We've used 3/4 of the fund that have been allotted. At least you could have announced those type of milestones.
Yeah, and you get an idea of how much is out there and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. You're now on a lottery, whether you get the funds or not, and it's not the sick kids lottery. It's the government lottery of if you get the rebate or not. That's the point we're at, you know. So. All right. So, of course, Mark, you do some podcasts with Brian from Future Aza, and I enjoy watching Brian's stuff. And he just posted a couple of days ago why Mexico electric vehicle plan could shock the world. And, you know, the growth in EV production, 1,500+%, which is great. Brian made the point, too, that the charging stations in the country is 2,304. It needs to grow. I'm not going to argue that at all. It definitely needs to grow. As an example, from Laredo, Texas to Puerto Vallarta, that was the first Tesla supercharging network that was put in place. I swear they did it when we had the $14,000 rebate, and they were like, oh, snowbirds from Canada and like Ontario and Quebec. Because that's the route they would take. But that's now expanded to Mexico City, to Cancun, Yucatan. But for some weird reason, I'm not sure quite what it is, but along the Pacific coast from California down is mostly level 2 chargers until you get to, I think Monterey is the last level 3 charger on that. But the other thing with this that's quite interesting is, of course, the manufacturing aspect of what Mexico is doing. And they have, of course, their own line of electric vehicles, and very reasonable. They're not huge. They actually, I saw a comment that one person made that this would be perfect in Mexico City. That small car fits nicely in small parking spots. You know, and in comparison to kind of to like a country like India, very much a similar idea with this aspect. And of course, the new Mexican president, she is very much, I think, an advocate for clean energy, not only with EVs, but with solar and everything. And I really hope that she kind of helps with getting more of this going in Mexico. And of course, price-wise, I think for the average Mexican consumer is going to make, of course, a big deal with this as well.
Yeah, one thing that always surprises me when I go down to Mexico is the price of gas is often even just a little bit higher than even in Canada. And you know, given the average income of Mexican people and stuff like that, you know, an EV, an affordable small EV, a small affordable EV like the BYD Dolphin, I think makes sense for a sizable portion of the population there. So, yeah, so it makes a lot of sense for Mexico to get on board and do this. So,
yeah, seeing those higher prices certainly will give some people pause to maybe start doing the calculations in their head as to, well, how much am I burning on fuel every month, every year? And if the EV is going to be here, The EVs are available. They're comparably priced. I can eliminate that cost and do the math. You keep the car for 5 or 6 years, and all of a sudden you're ahead of the game, and you're not looking back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's good to see. Mexico is expanding that way for sure. Even, just quickly too, the amount of solar panels I see now, they're all over the place. And I would say 10 years ago, you knew one person who kind of had it here, and that now it's all over the place. So I think the same thing will happen with electric vehicles. It'll be nice because then I don't have to hear these stupid, dirt bikes that are, loud and noise coming up the hill at 3 a.m. All right. I saw this article. This friend of mine sent it to me on my way down, actually, and it was very cool.
Yeah, this article I thought was kind of interesting. So this is a reporter that got this assignment on his desk, and he was saying, hey, his boss came out to him and said, hey, I want you to go out and test drive the new Cybertruck and give me your thoughts. And the guy's like, I'm not a car guy. Why would I even go out there? I don't drive an electric car. I don't do any of this. I'm not a truck guy. I'm not any of this. Why are you sending me on this job? And he goes out and he gets into test drive a Cybertruck, and he was thoroughly impressed by it and loved it. And I one of the things that caught the story, well, one, it was in Kitchener, local news report and in Kitchener. But two, I think it highlights the importance of some of the even work that we're doing is, sometimes you just got to get people into these cars and get their butts into the seats and let them try it and stuff like that too, and give them an opportunity to try, because EVs seem very scary to a lot of people on the surface when they don't do that. And driving an EV is a change, and change is scary, but it's not a massive change. It's one of those things that for the most people it's a much better change. And so once they get into it and they realize what it's like, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait a minute, this is pretty nice. So that's why I kind of like this story. So
yeah, I like that he wasn't a car guy, and he just came to it from left field and said, you know what, this is pretty neat. I like the ability of the vehicle, and I like how quiet it is, and it doesn't bother me. It's this thing that turns heads as well. He said it's kind of fun driving it.
Mm-hmm. The first comment I put here is some say it's ugly, but I disagree. I think it looks cool, which is interesting from, again, not a guy who's not a car guy. You kind of want to ask him, what movies do you watch? Are you into Blade Runner and all that stuff too? But it's funny. I hear people sometimes they say, the thing's awful looking and blah, blah, blah. But I've seen it with some black wraps, and it looks, to me, I like the black wraps a lot. I'm not as crazy about the silver. Just on its own, it's okay. But the black wrap, something about it just makes it look even more cool. But the one other thing, too, in the article was that it was brought up in a meeting, and nobody jumped at it. And then his boss, of course, called him and said, well, you're going to do it, And I'm kind of like, what do you mean nobody jumped at doing this? This is like one of the most unique and, interesting vehicles, whether you love it or hate it. But it's like, what do you mean you don't want to jump and check this thing out? So I think the one good thing about this article, and to both your points, is that he's not a car guy. He has never really driven an electric vehicle, but he was like blown away with all of it. And I think he has a lot better understanding, which helps the audience understand, like, hey, here's a guy, he actually really liked this thing, and he has no real experience with electric vehicles. Maybe I should go check that out. So I really enjoyed that. I actually sent him an email just quick to say, hey, that's a great article. I've driven to Mexico just to give you an idea about what can be done with these vehicles and stuff. So anyway, we'll see if I get a response. It might have got lost in the Ethernet, so who knows.
And it's like Eric's point previously, all you have to do is get butts in the seat, and it can change a lot of minds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, Ian, you bring up the point about, love it or hate it type thing. I remember a quote from good old Bob Lutz, who was around in the automotive industry for a long time. And when he worked for Chrysler, he was involved in the PT Cruiser program. And, you know, the PT Cruiser was also a very polarizing vehicle for its time. When they did marketing surveys for the research for it, they found that 70% of the people absolutely hated the car, but 20% absolutely loved it. And when they came out and did the market surveys, you know, the Chrysler execs were saying, this is horrible. 70% of the people hate this car. Bob Lutz goes, yeah, but 20% love it. And 20% of the market is a huge amount of the market still. So, you know, in the automotive industry, you know, no car is for one individual person. Every vehicle is a little bit different. And if you can appeal to a sizable market niche with a particular vehicle, it'll do well. So, yeah, and hopefully, and that seems to be, you know, the Cybertruck's in that category, I think. So.
Oh yeah, and funny enough, I have a friend who has had PT Cruisers for probably since they came out, and always is, you know, look for them if he needs to upgrade a PT Cruiser. It's interesting that you mentioned that, you know. But anyways, it was a great article, and it's butts and seats. That's all that matters. That's what I was going to mention. One of the hockey teams that I play with, the captain, in the dressing room, literally 3 days before my test drive, some of the guys were going on about electric vehicles, and of course I had to kind of like, you know, hey, the myths you're telling are so far out. Anyways, I took my hockey captain out in the test drive, and he was just blown away by the thing. Again, same thing, he'd never been in an electric vehicle, and just blown away. So, all right. So speaking about the Isev federal credit in Canada, out of funds.
Yeah, this is kind of anticlimactic. We won't spend time on this, but it obviously it happened. It happened quickly, and as we mentioned with the previous article, we were hoping that there would have been some sort of alert or warning that it was happening. But unfortunately, it's gone at this point. Not sure if it's coming back. We know that we've got an election that has to happen before fall of this year, and I'm not sure if it's going to be a carrot that's dangled in front of us, or if it's actually going to be reworked or not. So time will tell, but at this point we're kind of all left in the dark as to what's going to happen with the Isev and its quick demise at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, I think this is, you know, as of noon today, January 13th, not long ago, and just to say this sudden shift that it's done, it would have been nice to have seen, you know, a little bit of a cutoff date for people that way, that they would have been a little bit better in that. The bottom line still is, the way I look at it, is the 13.5% nationally, how much this has grown. And I'm really curious to see now over this year what that number is going to be now that we don't have these, you know, credits anymore.
Yeah, I wish we'd at least see some commitment to say, hey, we will guarantee that these are going to be funded for at least, you know, the next couple of years to do that, and to have that certainty of the program for a certain period of time. Because, you know, there are lots of manufacturers that are, you know, I was harping on about bringing out affordable EV options. There's lots of manufacturers saying that they're coming, and they're coming over the next couple of years. So it would be good if that rebate could survive for that time frame and say, okay, put your, you know, you're saying they're coming, okay, get them out, and we'll make sure we'll have the rebate for that time frame.
And one more thing is the silver lining here is, yes, it's gone, but again, 700,000 Canadians had taken advantage of this, and they are now driving an EV. So that is a sizable amount of the population that took Ottawa up on this offer and are now reaping the benefits.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and of course, the bums and seats, as we just mentioned, how much of that has expanded to their experiences, to their neighbors, their friends, family,
exactly.
etc. It only keeps growing. Yeah. So, all right. Well, talking about rebates, good old Dougie Ford came through. When I heard about this, I was like, sorry, is this the Beaverton? Because supposedly this is one of the biggest aspect of the rebates that we're seeing. And the big thing that I was really liking about this was the fact it wasn't just, windows, doors, insulation. It's like getting into solar and even battery storage, which I'm like, ooh, I want to find out more about that.
Yeah, so this is talking about electrification of your home, basically. If only it included an EV rebate for cars as well, too. That's pretty much the only thing that's missing. But they've included a lot of different funds for, your heating systems. If you want to replace your gas furnace with an air source or even a ground source heat pump, they've got funds for that. And then if you want to power that house, you can put in solar panels and even battery storage systems. And these are sizable rebates that make, $7,500 for an air source heat pump. That's a excellent rebate to have, and almost makes it a no-brainer for a lot of people to do that when you're looking at a furnace replacement. So, this is an awesome program, and it will go a long way, I think, to electrifying a lot of people's homes, and not only electrifying people's homes, but then putting in the infrastructure to offset some of those energies, with solar panels and stuff like that as well too. So, it's a fantastic program. I as much as I'm not a fan of Doug Ford usually, I have to give him kudos for this and the government for that. So this is, I think, a good program.
Yep, again, some tasty rebates here for people that have been waiting on the sidelines. This is excellent, and it's a great step forward. So hopefully, many Ontarians can take advantage of this and get some more energy independence for themselves and their households. And that's going to benefit all of us, even those that don't move. You're going to take some of that capacity away from the normal grid, and now some new homes are going to start feeding the grid. So that's fantastic news for all of us in Ontario.
Mm-hmm. One quick point too, being that we're dealing with the 25% Trump threat of tariffs, and Dougie Ford has been threatening back about cutting off the power to the 3 states. If I decide to, maybe I can find a place that I can put all this stuff into. I can Airbnb it out to the Americans who no longer have power in those 3 states. And say, hey, come on up. We got some solar and battery, and air source heat pump. You'll be warm. Oh, good. But no, it was really, actually, I was really happy not only to say, like, I know we talk about with Doug Ford, and there's definitely some stuff that we've not been happy about, especially when he first got in office. He ripped up 750 plus renewable energy contracts, and it's like, wow, this is kind of an about face. Mm-hmm. But this is also a conservative party, which I'm like, okay, this is cool. I'm glad to see that they're actually looking at doing these type of things. This isn't another Green Party / liberal, that's doing this. This is actually a party that's not necessarily known for offering this type of stuff. So good for them. It's great to see. All right. So there be our podcast from tonight. And you can see it's getting really romantic with the sunset here.
Yes, indeed. It's looking fantastic, Ian. We're all jealous, I'm sure. Everyone even watching the podcast is jealous. But
I've been shoveling snow the last 6 days, Ian. I'm incredibly jealous. So
I was telling Ian that we're getting an inch or so of snow every day for the past week. So
I'm in the snow belt. I'm getting 4 inches a day up here.
Oh, so. My goodness. Oh, my goodness.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I really, it's quite enjoyable down here. It's amazing, everybody's happy, I would say, it's amazing with the sun, and the whales are in the bay, and quite a number of whales. But it's definitely, shoveling snow and dealing with the cold and everything else. And I think especially as I got older, I really started hating it more and more. So I'm very lucky this way.
He's just rubbing the salt in the wound, isn't he, Eric? Yeah.
I was going to say, if you guys wanted to come down, you're welcome to come down. We could maybe do February's podcast on the roof here with all 3 of us while we're eating tacos and cervezas. There you go.
Oh my gosh! What about paradise?
I think we need to do like a REVA competition, a race to Puerto Vallarta, or something like that.
That's right. That's
Video
right.
the whole thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well,
we certainly thank everyone for watching today, and we appreciate you being there. Let's go to shout-outs. Eric, any shout-outs from you? Ian's going to have a taco vendor, I'm sure, but we'll go to Eric first.
The only shout-out I guess I have is I had a bonus story myself that, people keep talking about fusion and how fusion's always 20 years in the future, and that's still the case today, but Canada had a big breakthrough on their one of their test reactors where it actually were able to do sustainable fusion reaction and actually had net power positive reaction as well too. So it showed it was a concept reactor to show that it was a proof of concept and it was successful. And they're already under construction a larger scale demonstration reactor that's being built, and it was a company out of Richmond, BC called General Fusion that got it done. So. The technology is still a long ways away. It's probably at least 20 years away still, but it's good to see that there's other options still in the works. And finally, fusion's taking some positive steps in the right direction as well.
Great.
Yeah.
Ian.
I'm going to give 2 shout-outs just quick. First one, I want to give a shout-out to on Facebook. There's a group called On the Road to Mexico. And you can ask questions, show your trips, ask for advice. And I posted on there, and of course this is Canadians, Americans, etc. And I was like, okay, what am I going to get when I post about driving an electric vehicle down here and everything else? And you know what? I would say 99.99% likes, loves, great comments. I had a couple of guys were, being ridiculous with some of the, hypotheticals and everything else. But in general, I got some interesting inquiries on it, and just a lot of, people really thought this was really cool. So that was great to see. And then the second shout out is to David, who runs Choir. And if any of you have been to one of those shows, it's pretty incredible. It's basically these 2 guys who do songs that we all know, and then the audience is the choir, and they, conduct everything. I'm at the market, and he sees me with a Rush shirt, not this one, but he's with his 2 young kids, and I think his son would have been maybe 4 years old, and he had drawn a Rush fly-by-night on a piece of paper and put it onto his shirt, and he pointed it out to me, and we got chatting. And the cool thing was his kids, he could take his phone and play like a second of a Rush song, and the kids would identify it right away. Tom Sawyer, Free Will, Xanadu. And it was just, great guy. And it's just really cool. Funny thing with this area as well, there's a restaurant owner in Toronto for Barbarians. Getty and Alex from Rush actually quite enjoy that restaurant. I wore this shirt, happened to walk out of one of the restaurants, and this guy looks at me and goes, "Oh, you like Rush?" And I said, "Yeah." And he says, "Oh, I own Barbarians in Toronto. Those guys hang out with me all the time." So this area, there's a lot of Canadians, a lot of Americans, and there seems to be a lot of Rush fans here too. So pretty cool. Yeah. Anyways, good. I'll stop Robin.
Very good. Well, again, thanks very much for watching. If you haven't already, please give us a thumbs up on the video. Press that subscribe button. It helps us out immensely. And we'll get together next time and find out what's happening in electrifying news. Thanks, everyone.
Adios. Hasta luego, amigos.